Titanic, if people believed in any ship, it was the MV Explorer. This was the world's first cruise ship specially built to sail through ice. Its performance was so good that it even set records for rescuing many other ships in Antarctica. But on the night of November 23, 2007, in the dark and deserted Southern Ocean, something happened to this ship that forced its captain to leave it alone in the middle of the sea. Welcome once again, viewers, to Nexus of Knowledge Videos. In 1960, traveling to Antarctica by sea was considered nearly impossible because the ocean there was filled with ice, and under such conditions, for any normal ship to go, there was like inviting death. But a Swedish-American businessman named Erik Lindblad took this as a challenge and decided to build a ship that could easily travel to Antarctica so that people who dreamed of seeing that frozen continent could finally fulfill their dream. For this very purpose, a special ship was built. It was 240 feet long and weighed more than 2,300 tons. This ship was named the Lindblad Explorer. If we compare the Explorer with the famous ships of history like the Titanic or the RMS Olympic, it was certainly smaller in size, but in terms of strength and durability, it had no equal. It was the first cruise ship ever built with the purpose of taking passengers on a journey through the icy waters of Antarctica. Normally, ordinary ships cannot do this. If ships have to travel through frozen seas, an icebreaker is usually attached to the front to break the ice. But this was an Ice Class 1A ship, meaning it didn't need an icebreaker at all. Its hull was designed in such a way that the ice would break under its own weight as it moved forward. It had space for 104 passengers and 54 crew members. Along with all kinds of luxury facilities, there was something else that added even more prestige to the MV Explorer. Since it was specially built for voyages to Antarctica, its hull was made with a double layer of steel to keep it safe from the surrounding ice. As soon as it was launched, this ship became famous all over the world, and people began to dream of traveling to Antarctica aboard it. Originally, the ship was called the Lindblad Explorer, but over time, its owners changed several times. Finally, in 2004, it was purchased by a Toronto-based travel company called Gap Adventures, who renamed it the MV Explorer. After that, no one could have imagined that the ship would ever fall into anyone else's hands, or that anything tragic could ever happen to it. The Explorer had already completed 250 successful voyages to Antarctica. But in that same year's November, it was about to embark on a journey from which it would never return. It was November 2007. The MV Explorer was fully prepared for a 19-day expedition. The journey was to begin from the city of Ushuaia in Argentina, then pass through the Falkland Islands, onward to South Georgia Island, and finally reach Antarctica. On November 11, 2007, the MV Explorer set sail once again with 100 passengers and 54 crew members, ready for another beautiful Antarctic adventure. Up to this point, everything was going perfectly normally. No one could have imagined that this beautiful voyage would soon push them into a terrible crisis. The captain of the MV Explorer, 49-year-old Bengt Wyman, was an experienced seafarer who had sailed ships through these icy waters thousands of times before. Because of his vast experience, the passengers felt completely safe under Captain Bengt Wyman's command. But no matter how experienced a ship's captain in Antarctica might be, the region's constantly changing weather and ice conditions always bring new and unpredictable challenges with every voyage. At the start of this journey, Captain Bengt Wyman made a surprising decision. He chose to deviate from the planned route and take the ship along a new path. He believed that by doing so, they could avoid areas with heavier ice and reach their destination more safely. For the first 10 days, everything went exactly according to plan. But on the evening of November 22nd, as the sun was setting and passengers were preparing to return to their cabins, the MV Explorer entered a region filled with dense ice fields. At that moment, the captain made an announcement to everyone on board, saying that we were passing through an area full of ice. Because of the constant collisions with the ice, there was a lot of noise, and everyone had to endure it that night. Due to the darkness, the captain had reduced the ship's speed and set it to only 5 knots, which is about 10 kilometers per hour. Slowly, The ship was moving out of the region covered with a thin layer of ice toward an area where the ice was thicker and older. However, the captain did not realize this, as it was already 10 o'clock at night and visibility was very low. Around midnight, the ship suddenly stopped with a loud noise. At first, no one understood what had happened, but soon it became clear that the ship had come to a halt after colliding with a solid block of ice. Since the captain had already made an announcement about possible noise, many passengers did not pay attention to the sound and continued sleeping. After some time, the captain managed to get the ship moving again, and the ship once again began moving forward, cutting through the ice in the frozen sea. However, neither the captain nor the passengers on board knew that a hole had formed in the hull of the ship, and water had now slowly started to fill the lower part of the vessel. The sleeping passengers woke up only when water began to enter their cabins. Since the passenger cabins were located in the lower section of the ship, the water reached there first. Seeing this, a sudden wave of fear spread among the passengers. Everyone began running here and there in panic, trying to save their lives. Water was now entering the ship from every possible opening, through the light switches, duct vents, and even the cracks in the doors. By the time the captain became aware of the situation, several cabins had already been filled with water. At first, he thought that the damage might be minor and could be controlled. But as the water pressure kept increasing, the captain quickly realized that the situation had now gone beyond control. He immediately gave the order to evacuate the ship and deploy all the lifeboats. The lifeboats had already moved away from the icy region, but due to the accumulation of water, the ship had tilted to one side. The crew members were busy rushing passengers off the ship and saving lives. The ship was still 46 kilometers away from its destination, and reaching it with a damaged vessel was impossible. On the other hand, the Antarctic waters were extremely cold due to the ice, and the freezing wind made it impossible for anyone to stay on the lifeboats for long. Realizing the urgency, the captain began sending SOS signals to nearby ships. The signals were directed to well-known vessels, including the National Geographic Endeavour and the Nordnerg. However, these ships were quite far away, and it was impossible for the nearby ships to reach them immediately. Slowly, water began to accumulate in the MV Explorer's separator room. This is the room where all the ship's machinery is housed. In other words, it powers the entire vessel. Due to water filling this room, all electricity on the MV Explorer went out. In the middle of the icy Antarctic seas, the MV Explorer now stood completely alone in darkness. Its engines had stopped, and the ship was at the mercy of the ocean waves. While the captain was concerned about the evacuation, another worry began to trouble him. If the ship's engines were not restarted, the strong winds and waves could push it back into the ice-filled area. Because of the electrical failure, the crew attempted to start the engines manually. Fortunately, this idea worked, and the engines started once again, and the crew accelerated the evacuation process. Within a short time, all the passengers on board were seated in 4 lifeboats and lowered into the icy waters. For a while, the captain and a few crew members tried to keep the ship stable, but eventually, the engines failed again. Water was now rapidly flooding the MV Explorer, and the captain had to make a quick decision. Consequently, he and a few more crew members also evacuated into the lifeboats. Now, more than 150 people were in the lifeboats, waiting under the open sky in the freezing Southern Ocean for help. The icy wind made the wait extremely difficult. For the next 4 hours, the survivors waited, and finally, a ship arrived to rescue them. This was the Nordnerg, the vessel to which the captain had sent the SOS signals. All the people were successfully rescued, but it was the fate of the MV Explorer to sink. An investigation team later examined the incident and concluded that the accident had occurred due to Captain Bank Vaughn's error. He had mistaken the thick, old ice for a thin, first-year ice layer and steered the ship into the dangerous area. Today, the wreck of the MV Explorer lies 25 miles southeast of Penguin Island at a depth of 1,300 meters.